When salvage divers revisited the Challenger wreck site decades after the 1986 disaster, they expected rusted debris and silence. What they didn't expect was a sonar contact so distinct, so deliberate, it stopped the entire operation. Instruments lit up. The divers went down. What they discovered on the ocean floor wasn't just wreckage. It was evidence suggesting the Challenger crew may have lived longer than anyone believed. The official story, it turns out, may not be the full truth. What really happened? In the early morning of January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger lifted off from Launch Complex 39B at Cape Canaveral. At 11:38 a.m. EST, 7 crew members, including Krista McAuliffe and Gregory Jarvis, sat strapped into the crew cabin. This was the 51L mission, a flight scheduled to last roughly 6.5 days. Seconds later, only 73 seconds into flight, something went terribly wrong. The shuttle did not reach max Q or orbital insertion. It exploded high over the Atlantic Ocean. The official investigation concluded that a solid rocket booster RBO-ring failure at the right booster aft joint caused the accident. Temperatures before launch dropped into the 20s degrees Fahrenheit at 6 a.m. that morning, with frost visible on the launch pad structures. Engineers from Morton Thiokol warned that the O-rings would harden and lose flexibility in cold, but NASA managers pressed forward. Pressure to maintain schedule and improve shuttle operational reliability overshadowed technical risk warnings from January 27th conference calls. As the shuttle ascended past Mach 1, a brief plume of black smoke was visible in launch footage. At T plus 58 seconds, aerodynamic wind shear broke the temporary aluminum oxide seal inside the SRB joint. A gaseous plume burned into the intertank strut, weakening it. About 3 seconds later, structural failure allowed the external tank to rupture. Rapid combustion followed. NASA's Rogers Commission later described the cause as a structural breakup, not a high-order explosion. When the shuttle broke apart, debris began to fall. The orbiter structure separated from the external tank and continued upward to about 65,000 feet before falling back toward Earth. For decades, the public was told the destruction was total and instantaneous. Records of the breakup sequence were used to confirm the harsh reality. The astronauts did not survive the fall. Yet early recovery efforts would uncover details that would complicate that narrative. Having established what happened on January 28, 1986, and why Challenger broke apart over the Atlantic Ocean, the next section follows how the massive underwater search was organized, spanning hundreds of square miles. The search begins. Once the shuttle breakup was confirmed, the United States Navy and NASA launched what would become one of the largest maritime salvage efforts in history. The targeted area off the coast of Florida's Atlantic coast spanned nearly 500 square miles within the Cape Canaveral exclusion zone. Thousands of pounds of white debris were seen floating in the daylight hours after January 28th. But the primary mission was to locate major structural pieces, especially the crew compartment. The Navy deployed rescue and salvage ships, including the USS Preserver, ARS-8, to conduct systematic underwater sweeps. Side-scan sonar runs organized in straight grid lines covered deep sand plains and shifting silt. Submarines, remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, and commercial research vessels joined, creating a layered search network. Technicians monitored sonar screens for weeks, often spotting false contacts like rock formations, old wrecks, or fishing gear that mimicked metal debris signatures. Deep currents and soft silt made locating real wreckage extremely difficult. Off Cape Canaveral, the continental shelf dips and rises unpredictably. Echoes from the seafloor were unreadable at times. If the object was buried even a few feet under sand, its sonar return blurred into the background. Divers and sonar operators worked 12-hour shifts, scanning, reviewing, and often rerunning lines at depths around 80 to 120 feet below sea level. Despite this, technological advances helped narrow search zones. As sonar resolution improved, the team began to distinguish rigid geometric shadows from amorphous seabed patterns. While most aircraft debris after water impact scatters across wide ranges, anomalies began appearing that suggested large, intact objects. At this point, the mission shifted from finding floating wreckage to delving into the depths for heavy structural remains. With the search grid yielding increasingly precise results and sonar operators identifying possible rigid objects, the next section investigates the first key sonar contact that hinted at a crew cabin far more intact than the scientists expected. First unusual sonar contact. During a side-scan pass on March 2, 1986, the sonar operator aboard the USS Preserver noticed something unusual on the waterfall display. Instead of the scattered, jagged echoes typical of small rubble fields, the return was solid and sharply defined. This contact stood out among countless lines and specks of noise clutter. The shadow was roughly 30 feet long, box-shaped, and had corners that didn't resemble natural seabed contours. In standard shuttle breakup scenarios, aerodynamic forces at 46,000 feet cause extreme fragmentation. Pieces should be widely dispersed and heavily damaged, a confetti field of smaller parts. Yet this sonar signature suggested a large, rigid object, not broken fragments. When the ship circled back to rescan the contact at a different angle, the image sharpened, confirming artificial geometry. Radar and sonar mapping protocols require multiple passes to rule out false positives, and this held up on repeat sweeps. The experienced salvage commander and sonar technicians quickly realized this object did not match wings, tail sections, or cargo bay doors. Only one Challenger component matched that size and shape: the crew compartment, designed as the shuttle's strongest, most rigid section. While the shuttle's mid-body and payload bay might have shattered, the crew cabin was engineered to withstand high loads during abort scenarios and yet contain little redundant breakaway design. This discovery shifted the mission's emotional and operational focus. What lay beneath that silt wasn't just metallic wreckage, but a possible tomb for the 7 astronauts. Overnight, it became a recovery dive site of critical forensic importance. Orders were issued to prepare divers, OVS, and additional sonar for high-precision inspection. The mood on the Preserver changed from procedural search to somber expectation. With the sonar signature pointing to a large intact structure and all evidence aligning with the crew compartment, the next section examines what the divers encountered during the first descent into the dark, silt-filled ocean depths. Into the abyss. When sonar on March 7, 1986 first mapped what looked like the crew compartment of Challenger S-51MOL resting on the Atlantic Ocean floor, divers from the USS Preserver ARS-8 prepared to descend through murky water. The abyss off Cape Canaveral, at roughly 90 to 100 feet depth, was a world of cold gray where light vanished quickly and visibility hovered near zero. The salvage divers knew they were about to enter a gravesite, not merely an underwater recovery project. The initial descent was tense. As each diver followed the guideline down from the surface, the temperature dropped toward the mid-40s degrees Fahrenheit, and their eyes strained against darkness that thickened below -10 feet. Sonar had indicated a solid target, a roughly 30-foot-long object clinging to the sand and silt. But until the divers' flashlights cut through the water, they didn't know exactly what awaited them. The ocean floor there was uneven, with rolling sand ripples and debris scattered out over several square miles of seabed. When the lead diver's torch finally lit the object, reality hit. The shadows on sonar were real. The front of the shuttle's crew deck, scorched and stripped of many heat tiles, sat buried partially in the soft bottom, wires and fragmentary wiring trailing out like grotesque roots. The reinforced aluminum cockpit, designed to withstand re-entry loads, was visibly intact enough to be recognizable by shape and construction. What had once been the heart of America's spacefaring pride now rested under 90 feet of water. Divers moved methodically, mapping the wreckage and photographing details for later analysis. The condition of the crew compartment confirmed what the sonar had hinted. This was not a random chunk of metal, but a deliberate salvage target. Numerous flights of 12-hour dive shifts, supported by sonar traffic above, helped delineate where pieces of equipment, personal effects, and structural fragments lay beneath the silt. The depth and murky conditions made each descent psychologically heavy. These were not routine underwater repairs, but a descent into history and tragedy combined. With divers now face-to-face with the submerged crew compartment wreckage, the next section examines what they discovered inside and how what they found challenged assumptions about the crew's final moments during the 2-minute 45-second descent. What they found inside. Once divers reached the Challenger wreckage at approximately 100 feet, recovery teams began the meticulous work of documenting every piece. Unlike most debris fields from high-altitude breakups, the crew cabin remained in one area, largely intact beneath layers of sand and silt. ROVs and manual probes showed structural frames and panels preserved enough for identification, much like the sonar maps had suggested. An unusual find for a breakup at about 46,000 feet. NASA officials confirmed that the recovered section of the forward crew cabin contained remains of the 7 astronauts, still in place and secured in their seats. This was first reported publicly the next day, with missions such as STS-51-L being officially linked to the find. Family members were informed, and NASA described the conformation of the cabin before releasing details on individual condition out of respect for loved ones. The cockpit and mid-deck structure revealed not just debris, but items that indicated human response after the breakup. Recovered personal egress air packs, PAPs. Emergency packs designed with about 6 minutes of breathable air were found activated in some stations, meaning that at least 2 crew members had reached behind or been helped to activate them during the fall. While PAPs do not pressurize the cabin, their activation showed that crew interaction occurred then after cabin separation. Investigators also cataloged electrical switches that had been moved from standard launch positions. Detailed analysis concluded that certain switches in pilot Michael J. Smith's panel were manually placed, a situation consistent with an attempt to restore power or manage systems during the fall. The official Rogers Commission and subsequent NASA reports noted these findings as evidence the crew was responsive after breakup, even if the lack of cabin pressurization likely rendered them unconscious quickly. With the crew compartment verified and evidence pointing toward activity after breakup, Section 6 shift focused to how these recovery details reshaped understanding of the Challenger accident and the legacy of the Rogers Commission findings. Impact on the public story and legacy. The discovery of the Challenger crew compartment and the details of its condition had seismic impact on how the disaster was understood. Prior to the recovery, public narrative assumed instantaneous destruction at breakup. However, the fact that the cabin remained in one piece and carried human remains provided stark evidence of the physics involved when a spacecraft suffers a structural breakup at high altitude. Rogers Commission findings, delivered on June 6, 1986, emphasized that the O-ring failure in the right solid rocket booster, SRB, and subsequent aerodynamic breakup were rooted in engineering decisions despite known risks highlighted by Morton Thiokol engineers. The recovery of the cabin helped illustrate how the orbiter broke apart and how large components could survive descent to water impact. Alongside these technical findings, the discovery of activated APES and control switches moved public perception toward a tragic story of conscious struggle, not immediate loss of life. While NASA's official report did not record voice data from the fall, since voice recorders were not designed for post-breakup operation, the physical evidence suggested that at least some crew members remained capable of movement and response during part of the cabin's 2-minute 45-second descent. The recovery itself continued through April 1986, with the Preserver and other vessels completing the salvage mission. The remains of the 7 astronauts were brought ashore, identified, and then interred with honors, with funerals extending into late April and May 1986. The Challenger Center for Space Science Education was later created by families to advance STEM education, ensuring the Challenger legacy influenced future generations. The somber recovery. When ocean salvage teams first located the crew compartment of Challenger STS-51L on March 7, 1986, their mission became not just technical, but deeply emotional. Divers from the USS Preserver, ARS-8, and other Navy units began systematic dives at roughly 100 feet depth in the Atlantic Ocean off Cape Canaveral to document and prepare the wreckage for recovery. Over the weeks that followed, salvage crews worked shifts that lasted up to 12 hours. combing through what remained of the massive shuttle's fragments on the seabed. Sonar had pinpointed 881 potential debris targets across 486 square miles of ocean floor. But the crew cabin was the priority. By April 4th, 1986, salvage operations focused intensely on the large structural pieces. Heavy cables and lifting gear were attached to the compartment and other major sections, and each recovery winch-up was treated with the utmost care. Salvers knew they were handling not just hardware, but the final resting place of the 7 astronauts. Personal effects, seats, ceiling supports, and even parts of the crew deck frame were brought to the surface. Deep water conditions meant that some parts of the shuttle, such as the SRB shells weighing 196,726 pounds, had to be treated differently. A large portion was later recovered and handled separately. The operation to retrieve debris in the crew compartment continued through April and into late summer 1986, making it one of the most challenging underwater recovery missions in U.S. history. With significant wreckage now above water and being studied, the next section explores what the recovered data and physical evidence revealed about the fate of the Challenger crew and how it shaped the official narrative. What the evidence told us about the crew's final moments. Once the crew compartment was aboard ship and later delivered to forensic and NASA teams, investigators began detailed analysis of every recovered piece. The structural condition of the crew cabin confirmed that it had remained largely intact following the vehicle breakup at T+73 seconds. NASA's Challenger crew report, released on July 28, 1986, stated that while the forces of breakup were probably not enough to cause fatal injury, the cabin suffered loss of pressure soon after separation. This rapid depressurization likely led to loss of consciousness from lack of oxygen. Examination of the remains recovered from the compartment, including those found on March 10, 1986, showed the crew members in their flight suits and restrained in their seats. Identification was possible because the astronauts were still in their harnesses, despite severe impact and submersion effects. Medical examiners determined that the cause of death could not be conclusively established from the remains. Decomposition after weeks in salt water made precise conclusions impossible. Nonetheless, the evidence supported the idea that the cabin fell as a unit and that loss of consciousness occurred shortly after breakup. With physical evidence and human remains accounted for, the next section examines how these findings influence public understanding, NASA policy, and how Challenger's legacy shapes space exploration safety for decades. Public perception, policy, and safety culture. The recovery of Challenger wreckage and crew remains profoundly affected public perception of spaceflight risk and the narrative of the ST and S-51LL mission. When President Ronald Reagan addressed the nation after the tragedy, he honored the 7 crew members and spoke of courage in the face of adversity, a message that has persisted through decades of space history. The Rogers Commission report, released on June 6, 1986, not only documented the technical causes of the failure, primarily the right SRB O-ring failure, but also criticized NASA management for ignoring engineering concerns and safety warnings prior to launch. In response, NASA undertook structural changes, including the establishment of the Office of Safety, Reliability, and Quality Assurance, which was meant to report independently of operational program pressures, a direct outcome of lessons learned from the disaster and later emphasized in space safety practices. We delve into remaining questions raised by the recovery. What mysteries still surround Challenger, and how its underwater evidence continues to influence how we think about space exploration and human risk. Unresolved questions and the human element. Although NASA and investigators charted a comprehensive picture of the Challenger ST-S51L disaster, some questions endure about what exactly transpired in the final seconds and what human experiences might have occurred as the crew cabin descended. One enduring topic of debate revolves around timing of consciousness loss. NASA's follow-up releases acknowledge that loss of cabin pressure likely resulted in unconsciousness seconds after breakup, but they also noted that definitive confirmation was impossible due to the violent impact and submersion. This uncertainty, Whether the crew was aware of events beyond T plus 73 seconds continues to fuel discussion in engineering and human factors forums. Did the astronauts have moments of clarity before impact? Did they attempt corrective actions? The physical evidence recovered doesn't fully answer these human questions, but it brings them into the realm of serious inquiry. The Challenger tragedy is etched in memory, but what divers found beneath the Atlantic raises chilling new questions. The cabin, the switches, the sonar, none of it lines up with what we were told. Could more secrets be buried in the deep? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.